Good morning, children. Welcome to the channel. Now, the next topic that we will do in this video is steps of respiration. Children, there are certain steps of respiration that are to be followed. Now, here the first is pulmonary ventilation, which is commonly known as breathing. After that, gas exchange between lung, alveoli, and blood. Then gas transport, that is oxygen will be transported and carbon dioxide will be also be transported in opposite directions. After that, gas exchange between blood and tissues, and then comes the cellular or tissue respiration. So all these steps will be done in detail in the upcoming videos. Now, the first thing that we will do here is breathing, that is pulmonary ventilation or breathing. So, we have to understand what is the mechanism of breathing. So, children, breathing involves two steps as you see. The first is inspiration, which is also known as inhalation. Okay, and the second one is expiration or exhalation. Now, inspiration is active intake of air from the atmosphere into the lungs. Okay, and expiration is passive expelling of air. Now, you have to pay attention on these two words. While when we are describing inspiration, we are using the word active intake, but when we are doing expiration, we are writing passive expelling. Why? I will explain you this a bit later on in the video. Now, active intake of air from atmosphere into lungs, because we have to put some energy to breathe in the air from the atmosphere and move it on to the lungs. Now, but expiration, during expiration, what happens is it is passive expelling, that is no energy is being used up for expelling of the air from the lungs. So that is why it is called passive. Now let's move on. Inspiration, as you see here, children. Now the diaphragm, you all know this is the diaphragm. You see this dome shaped structure is called diaphragm, on which both the lungs are resting. So the diaphragm contracts when we are inhaling the air, when we are doing inhalation, or when we are doing inspiration, the diaphragm will contract. And when as soon as the diaphragm gets contracted, this diaphragm, which was dome shaped earlier, it will be flattened. So mind it, the diaphragm which was earlier dome shaped, this will flatten. You see the downward arrow they are showing you, this will get flattened. Okay, and because the diaphragm has flattened, so the volume inside has increased. Earlier the diaphragm was dome shaped, now the diaphragm has been flattened. You see this was the earlier, you can see this light line they have shown, this was the earlier position of diaphragm, but now the diaphragm has been flattened a bit, you see. So this much volume has increased, right? This much volume has increased. Now what happens, as the diaphragm flattens, the vertical volume, you see this vertical volume, earlier the volume was from here till here, but as the diaphragm has flattened, now the volume has increased from this point to this point. So vertical volume increases. Anterior-posterior axis, anterior posterior axis means the diaphragm from the top, the volume from the top till the bottom has increased. Now, because the volume has increased, the thoracic volume also increases. Now, this is thorax. This whole portion is the thorax. Now, because here the volume has increased, vertical volume has increased, so the volume of the thorax has also increased. And because the volume has increased, but the air was already, the air which was already present inside, that quantity has not changed. The volume has changed, but the air quantity of air has not changed. So what happens? The pressure decreases. Understood? Again, I am repeating, as the diaphragm gets contracted, the volume increases. Now, because the volume has increased, but the amount of air inside it is not changing. It has not changed yet. So, because जगह ज़्यादा हो गई, but the number of particles are same, तो हम क्या कहेंगे? That pressure has decreased. Now, as the pressure decreases, the lungs expand and the pulmonary volume also increases, because lungs को ज़्यादा जगह मिल गई, they have got a lot of space, so lungs will also try to expand. Now, because the lungs have expanded, so the pulmonary volume, that means now we can say that lungs can have more air which they were having earlier. पहले जितनी उनके पास वॉल्यूम था, अब उनका वॉल्यूम बढ़ गया, because the vertical volume has increased. Now, because of the increase in the pulmonary volume, intrapulmonary pressure also decreases. Children, it is very, very easy to understand that when volume is increased, the pressure will decrease. Suppose you in your classroom, just imagine you are sitting in your classroom and 50 students are in your classroom. Now, suddenly, if I ask you to, move on your classroom to a big hall, but the number of students will be same. So what will happen? The volume has increased, but the number of particles or the number of students are same. So the pressure or the density has decreased because the volume has increased. So same way here also, as the lungs as the volume increases, the vertical volume increases, the pressure inside will decrease. Now, because the pressure inside is less, but the outside pressure is high, and we all know that movement of particle will take place from high pressure to low pressure. So, what will happen? The air moves from outside into the lungs. Now, the air from the outside will move into the lungs, and this is how inhalation is done. Clear? Next is expiration. Now, children, just the opposite. Expiration is exhalation or throwing out of the air through the nasal chamber or the nostrils. Now, we see that intercostal muscles and the diaphragm which was contracted here, the diaphragm which got contracted here, now during expiration it has relaxed. Now, as the diaphragm has relaxed, it will move back to its original position. You see the upward arrow. Earlier the diaphragm was here. Earlier the diaphragm was here, but now the diaphragm has moved on to its original shape, that is dome shaped. Okay, so what will happen? Again, the volume has decreased, right? The volume which was increased during inhalation has now decreased during exhalation, and because the volume is less but the number of particles, air particles, are very high because we have already inhaled the air. Now, because the number of particles of air are more and the volume is less, so what happens? The pulmonary pressure increases. The pressure will increase. Why? Because the volume has decreased. again the pulmonary volume also has decreased and the pressure has increased. So now the pressure inside is high in comparison to the pressure outside. So what will happen? The air will move out. This is exhalation. So during forceful expiration, now when we ask you children, you have seen Baba Ramdev saying ki kapal bhati karo, so or anulom vilom karo. So what is that? A forceful expiration and forceful inhalation. So during forceful expiration, abdominal muscles, you see, and intercostal muscles get contracted, because at that time we are forcing the air. Normally we are not doing that. When we are breathing normally, we are not putting lot of stress for inhaling or exhaling. But when we are doing some kind of breathing exercises, we forcefully do that, and because of that abdominal muscles and intercostal muscles get contracted. So this is what is inhalation and exhalation. You see, mechanism of breathing has been shown here. Okay, so I hope you have understood what is mechanism of breathing.